I think some of what we're seeing are basically pushing power and pushing authority in directions that we haven't gone before.
We're at a moment now where we have a president who feels unusually unconstrained.
I think we have to be concerned because this administration is pressing boundaries every day.
And some of what President Trump has had to say about the courts and their rulings has not always been reassuring.
Judges are trying to take away the power given to the president to keep our country safe, and it's not a good thing.
As important as we're told the rule of law is, it can sometimes feel pretty abstract. Something, yes, legalistic. But for the rest of us, it's a matter of predictability and fairness. Something that runs silently in the background until it really matters.
My parents came from South Korea, and Korea was subjected to a military dictatorship. And when I was in high school, I went to Korea, and there was an assassination attempt on the president who had installed himself as a dictator. Suddenly they declared martial law, and I couldn't go home.
Harold Koh went on to be dean of the Yale Law School and the chief legal officer in the State Department. But he got his first direct exposure to the importance of following predictable rules when he was a young Korean American visiting his extended family in the country of his heritage in the early 1970s.
I called my father, and he told me, you know what happened here in America? Richard Nixon just resigned, and Gerald Ford is the president, and there are no tanks in the street, there are no guns. And I said, what does this mean? And he said, this is the difference between the rule of law and the rule of individuals. He said, in America, if you're president, the troops obey you. In Korea, if the troops obey you, they'll call you president.
Protecting the foundations of our system historically is the job of U.S. judges and the lawyers who appear before them in litigation. Lawyers like the Fellows of the American College of Trial Lawyers, currently led by its president, Rick Deane.
It's an invitation-only group of trial lawyers, and you actually have to be a trial lawyer in order to be considered for induction. There's a fairly lengthy process by which you are considered. You have to have been a member of the trial bar for at least 15 years.
Is there a political tilt one way or the other, left or right, at the American College of Trial Lawyers?
We are an organization that across the political spectrum, you're going to find fellows with all kinds of political ideas, and that's not important to us. We are committed to certain core concepts. One of those is to the advancement of the rule of law, protecting judicial independence, and frankly, supporting the access to justice, the concept of access to justice. So those are our key tenets, and politics is not one of those. We're talking about that set of sort of governing principles that bring stability and predictability to our liberty. It's a concept of ordered liberty, and these are the guardrails, the rules.
Are you more active in supporting, defending the rule of law today than you have been in recent years?
I think a fair response is yes, and in part that's because I think we're coming to see things that concern us. And when I say we, I mean the college itself, but primarily operating through its executive committee and its leadership. We're coming to see things that concern us. As I've gone around and spoken to fellows in both the U.S. and Canada, they're expressing to me concerns that they have as well. So yes.
Professor Koh is even more emphatic about his concerns over recent government actions.
I think it's the worst crisis of my lifetime, and I'm not a young man, sad to say. The ultimate Supreme Court test may be coming. But frankly, this Supreme Court has given Trump way more rope than he should have been given. There have been more than 70 rulings at the district and circuit courts against Trump. I speak as someone who is a birthright citizen. It's protected by the express words of the 14th Amendment. It has been held explicitly by U.S. versus Wong Kim Ark, which is a Supreme Court decision from the 1830s. And it has been consistently sustained, and there's a statute which states it as well.
You'll find out.
a few minutes after taking an oath in which the president said he would obey the Constitution, he signed an executive order violating the Constitution, namely saying that he would not respect birthright citizenship.
They are coming for our rights.
Often we talk about things like the rule of law when we're concerned about personal liberties, like birthright citizenship. But for Deane, we need to make every bit as sure that everyone plays by the rules when it comes to markets and to business.
The rule of law is important to personal liberty, but it's also fundamentally important to our economic well-being. That it's the rule of law that provides predictability, that provides stability, such that we're actively participants in our own economy. Why would Steve Jobs want to develop the iPhone and all of the technology and the intellectual capital that went into that technology? It's not just for the glory of having done it. He's intending to capitalize on his intellectual capital, his intellectual property. It's the rule of law that allows that predictability. It assures him that his intellectual capital, his intellectual property, can't simply be stolen and compromised by somebody else, that he will get the benefit of it. And that brings about innovation. That brings about development of greater intellectual capital. And I think that's very important to understanding what the rule of law brings to our society.
After practicing law in Washington at Wilmer, Cutler, and Pickering, he and I were partners there back in the 1980s. Doug Melamed went on to head the antitrust division of the Justice Department, and then to serve as general counsel for Intel.
Shortly after I got to Intel, we were having an annual gathering of the worldwide corporate affairs folks. And I was going to do an interview with one of the most senior officers in the company. And I said to him, give me a couple of ideas of times where the government affairs people have saved your bacon, and maybe a couple of things you would like from them going forward in the near future. And his answer to me was, look, as far as I'm concerned, it's your job, meaning the general counsel, it's your job to tell me what the rules are, and it's my job to optimize within them. They want to know what the rules are. They need predictability. They need a sense of fairness, that the rules are going to be applied in a predictable way to everybody, and then they can carry on their business.
How do we get to that level of sufficient predictability through the rule of law?
You have a rule of law or the absence of the rule of law. It's a continuum. And no society, I imagine, is going to have a flawless rule of law that sort of checks all the boxes all the time. There's only one alternative to the rule of law, and that's might makes right. Because either you have rules that constrain the exercise of power by the powerful, or the powerful are going to make the rules and they're going to run society. So the first element is it has to be a body of rules that constrain the powerful, including the government, as well as others. And that means that the rules have to be applied equally, fairly to everybody. They have to be predictable and knowable. Predictable so that entities can know what they need to do to comply with the law. Knowable for reasons of transparency and trust in the legal process. You can't make anti-competitive mergers, you can't engage in fraud and securities fraud and set up a Ponzi scheme and so forth. Contracts are to be enforced, property rights are to be respected, and so on. But I think your question really illuminates the importance of the value of the rule of law for a business entity, because all of us feel constrained sometimes and wish there weren't a speed limit. But we all benefit from the fact that everyone else is constrained too. It's not just a guardian against corruption and personal misdeeds. It is also a guardian of an environment of robust business and economic sector.
As an expert in international law, one who served as a legal advisor at the U.S. State Department, Harold Koh knows firsthand how important it is for the U.S. to play by the established rules so that others will.
International law rules set default patterns of compliance. That doesn't mean that you can't break away from those, but there's a cost in doing so. And there are two costs in particular. One is that most of the other countries are continuing to follow the default, and so if you break away, suddenly you're in tension with them, and then you have to negotiate the differences. And the second difference is that if you break away from the rules of international law, you cannot enforce them against others when they also break away. So, for example, it turned out that before the World Trade Organization appellate panels, the United States was winning most of its cases. Trump, in the last administration that he led, decided that the World Trade Organization's appellate process was disadvantageous to the United States. He did it clearly with no understanding of the track record, and he broke it off. And now why should China obey the rules? The United States is not going to obey the rules. Lawlessness breeds lawlessness, and lawfulness breeds lawfulness.
None of us wants lawlessness when it comes to either our liberties or our markets. But for some, commitment to that abstract rule of law, to order and fairness and equal treatment, is more than just business. It's personal.
I had a very simple prodding to go into law, and it was largely through my grandmother. I grew up in a small town in South Georgia, primarily raised by my grandmother. I didn't know a lawyer. I'd never met a lawyer. And so most of what I knew and thought I knew about being a lawyer, I learned from watching television.
What did your grandmother see in the law and you?
You know, I marvel at that even now quite a lot, because I talk about my grandmother often when I have occasion to speak to groups and the like, because I want to honor her and acknowledge her. And this was in the 50s, in the throes of segregation and Jim Crow and so forth. She told me that there wasn't anything I couldn't do. And, you know, because she said it, I believed it, because I adored her and I hung on every word that she said. And so what I saw in my grandmother is that she didn't have some grand notion about the rule of law. What she had was a simple understanding that she needed to be and wanted to be free and treated fairly. And while her world wasn't allowing that, she was telling me that she saw a time in which it would allow it for me, and that she wanted me to be prepared to meet that moment and then to take advantage of it.